Hello guys, and welcome to a new episode here on my channel, The Post-Apocalyptic Inventor. And as you can see, I'm once more surrounded by vintage electronics, like this old vacuum tube radio here, this classic turntable, or these portable CRT televisions here that I've hooked up to a Raspberry Pi. And believe it or not, since I found this one here at the local flea market, I'm even back to analog photography. And well, I've spent a lot of time over the years repairing older stuff, and I think that many people, even my friends, thought that that was a waste of my lifetime. But well, if you take a look at our culture right now, shows like Stranger Things or Dark on Netflix are super popular. There are phenomena like Turbo Kid or Kung Fury, and also of course here on YouTube, retro gaming is huge. Retro gaming reviews, also reviews of 80s movies, for example. So I think we are in the age of nostalgia now, and I think a lot of people are thinking back and, well, want to have things again like vacuum tube amplifiers, turntables, mini arcades, which is what I'm building here, similar to the Vectrex, if you still know what that is. So I think that repairing vintage audio gear could become once more a valuable and needed skill. So I'll cover that in a bunch of videos, and this one will be the first of these repair marathons. So welcome to the HiFi repair marathon. So the first patient today is this German-made portable transistor radio and cassette recorder combination, aka boombox. Grundig C6200 automatic from around 1975 or thereabouts. I got this years ago from an eBay auction of various old radios, and it cost me less than €5 or so. Its look can be considered retro-futuristic in that it has none of the brown tones and fake wood paneling of the day. This is also an example of what I call the spaceship look of retrofuturism, where the designers try to fit as many knobs, buttons and meters into the design as possible. You can tell that because it has such features as a voltmeter measuring the battery charge, a timer, an equalizer, and switches for external loudspeakers. As you can see, it is very dusty on the outside, and this is what is taken care of first. This hand crank at the side here is used to adjust the radio tuner, by the way. And a thorough cleaning of the outside should always be your first step, because it allows you to take the time for an outside inspection and see things that you might otherwise overlook. In this case, I find a broken antenna that has to be fixed. And the other notable fault here is the door of the tape deck. One of its hinges is broken, and this as well will have to be taken care of. So I proceed by opening the enclosure from the back side, and let's get an overview over the various functional units we can see in here. Power supply and fuses, power amp, radio receivers, loudspeaker, ferrite rod antenna as part of the receivers, quick buttons for stored radio stations, and over here the tape deck. And in order to fix that door, we have to take out the entire tape deck first. And to get there, I also have to remove the on-off switch and this little mechanical timer here that was probably used an estimate number of 0 times since 1977. And with the tape deck out of the way, we can now access these little metal wires that hold the door hinges in place. I unhook them with my needle nose pliers. And there you can see how that works and what exactly is broken. The ends of these wires go into the little holes on these plastic hinges on the back side of the door, the left one of which is broken. A new hinge will have to be made. But before doing that, I remove the rust from these little pieces of steel wire with some sandpaper and then apply a little bit of silicone spray. And here is another close-up of that broken hinge, and I start to remove its remains by using a knife. But I need more room here to attach a new hinge, and that is why I grind off some of the plastic with the help of a grinder attached to a power drill. And this is what it looks like after the grinding. The next thing I need are metal sheets to make a new hinge, and I choose copper bands like these because I happen to have them lying around and because they are easy to work with. I use a side cutter to cut out this shape here, and here I show you where it will be placed. The band over copper sheet is then soldered together so that it will actually hold. And here you can see the hole where that little wire will be inserted. Now I again use the sandpaper to roughen the bottom side of the copper sheet, and now I apply glue to the back of the door. And like many times before, I use my favorite type of adhesive, MS polymer, which I have found to be a wonderful all-rounder. The brand really doesn't matter, just look for MS polymer. After I have given it 3 days to harden, this is what our hinge looks like. Now the wires are reinserted and the door is reinstalled. So on to the next problem then, that broken or rather missing antenna. Now I won't be able to install a new antenna exactly like the one that was originally installed, where it could just vanish inside the enclosure entirely. But at least I can try to install a new antenna so that the radio will at least work again. For that purpose I have chosen this antenna that I salvaged from some other device some time ago. I first disconnect the two parts of the antenna, and now I remove this little connector part from the base. And now I will reuse that base, but I cut it to a much shorter length with an angle grinder off camera. And here is that cut off piece, the surface of which I'm now grinding off with a file to remove the chrome plating on the outside. The little hinge part here is now inserted again. Now I desoldered this part from the radio temporarily so that I can work on it more freely. And what I do again is to sand off the surface. Now these two parts fit together, and I use my soldering iron to connect them permanently. And after soldering it back, this telescope antenna can now be reattached to the enclosure. As you can see, it cannot be retracted into the enclosure like the original, but it doesn't take up that much space either, so I for one think that it is a major improvement over what we had before. So with the cassette tapes deck door repaired and a new antenna attached, this radio is good to go. And here's the next patient. A cheap little portable radio, cassette and CD combination, as it was typically made in the early 2000s, not exactly a collector's item, but still good enough to learn a lesson or two. The neighbors had complained that it wouldn't play any CDs anymore, and I'm testing that right now, as you can see. Nothing happens, and the disc just won't play. But because this thing is normally used in a kitchen, it has another typical issue. There is a mixture of grease and dirt on the surface. One way to deal with this nasty type of dirt is with an old toothbrush and some soapy water or detergent. That way you can get that grease and dust and whatnot out of all the little indentations. And in order to take care of the malfunctioning CD player, let me try another trick that works a lot of the time. I open the enclosure and look inside. At first glance I can't see any obvious problems though. But now I take the blowgun attached to my compressor and apply it directly to the CD drive, trying to reach the optics inside. I've done this in a video before and someone said that it might just get oil inside the optics. But I have never encountered a problem with this method in real life, and you can get 95% of CD players back in action with pressurized air. And if you don't want to use a compressor, get yourself some pressurized air in a can then. And after putting it back together, let's see what happens. And here is the next problem child, a Yamaha RX 300 stereo receiver, built probably somewhere between 1986 and 1988. And this one was given to me by a viewer. Thanks again, Peter from Cologne. And here is my usual second step after cleaning the outside, looking at the inside and removing the dust with my compressor. And just a warning, in this repair I fix a mains power device with an open enclosure while it is still plugged in, at least for some of the time, that is. So please don't attempt something like this if you're not absolutely sure what you're doing and if you don't really know which parts are safe to touch and which are not. In the meantime, I have now attached my phone to the auxiliary input of this amplifier, and I will try to show you the issues that this device has. One of the channels seems to be faulty, or at least only works now and then. Both channels, only the right channel, only the left channel. So you can hear that the right channel is much louder. We're at top volume now on the left channel. That's both channels again. I go back to the beginning of the video, of the track, and now I swap left and right input channels to cancel out that this is a problem of the input. You know, the left input could also be much quieter because, for example, the cable could be broken. So let's try this again. I'm starting the video again. Left side and right side. Both sides. Left channel again. Can barely hear it at top volume. Now let me try something else. I'm starting the video again. I put the balance knob right in the middle so that both channels are active. Start the video again. Now let me just knock against the front panel. It's a bit louder, but still sounds scrappy, is having a bad contact. Now I'm just knocking against the volume button, balance button. Okay, so the source selector switch seems to have a contact issue, it seems. Let's start it again. So if I slightly, only so slightly move the... It's getting louder, huh? So it's actually, it seems, a contact issue of the source selector. And as you have probably noticed in the footage right now, when I knocked against the front panel, not only the left channel, but also the 7-segment display and the other LEDs on the front panel didn't light up anymore. So it is very likely that either the ground connection or the supply voltage connection of all of these LEDs and of the display are somehow also interrupted, also have a contact issue. Or it is also possible that the source selector switch is causing that problem as well. It seems unlikely, but it could be. I suspect another contact issue with one of these wires here though, and we will have to find out. In order to fix both of these problems though, I will have to take this receiver further apart. To remove the aluminium part of the front panel, screws both on the sides as well as on its bottom have to be unscrewed. Now the metal part can be lifted off, revealing the plastic portion of the front panel underneath. It in turn holds a number of smaller PCBs holding the LEDs and buttons. And now we can identify the type of the source selector switch for the first time. Now some zip ties are cut and some copper screws directly on top of the motherboard, as well as other screws on the back panel, have to be removed to lift the board out of the enclosure. The plastic portion of the front panel stays attached for now. Here on the back side are the pins of the switch that needs to be repaired. I started by bending all the pins straight up while heating up the solder next to the respective pin. Now a soldering iron and desoldering pump are used to remove the solder from each and every leg. While doing this, give it a little time and don't always choose directly neighboring pins at a time so that the component in question doesn't overheat locally. As a last step, I use just the tip of the soldering iron to free all the legs that have reattached themselves to remains of solder, which happens almost always. And here is the switch. Now let's open it. Now opening the switch will always be a little different as there are a million different types. There is also almost no chance to find a direct replacement, so be careful not to screw it up or lose any of its parts. And here we can clearly see the corrosion and possibly some other dirt that is causing the contact issues. The switch will have to be cleaned. And I typically do this as follows. I take the rough side of an unused kitchen sponge and ever so carefully grind off the surface of the contacts. Here it has to be done both on the outside as well as on the inside. Now I take a little bit of paint thinner to wipe off any possible grease or dirt from the surfaces. I also clean these little copper contacts with paint thinner as well. And now the switch is put back together and soldered back onto the motherboard. And now let's see if this has helped. Phono, CD input, nothing connected. Radio, that was the radio. And this is auxiliary. Putting on one of my videos. Now balance all to the left and balance all to the right, and that works just fine. Try to wiggle around at the selector switch and there is no change in the sound as we had before. Okay, so that works again. In the next step I then tried to find out about the connection issues of the LEDs. But after repairing the switch, I could no longer trigger this fault. But to be sure, I also renewed all the solder joints of the various wires connecting both parts. And then of course, everything was put back together. I also tested the radio receiver, but cannot show you the results because I don't want to cause any copyright problems with YouTube. But I have now connected my oscilloscope directly across the two loudspeakers on the output side in order to show you that the amplifier works again. So here are our two channels, decreasing volume and increasing volume. I think you get the idea. So ideally, of course, there should be the exact same voltage on both outputs, no phase shift or anything like that, no distortions here, and all in all that looks pretty well. Now let me change the balance from, more to the left and more to the right. You can see how one channel is getting quieter. Now we're in the mid position again. And now the other one. So this was the first HiFi electronics repair marathon. I already repaired some other audio devices like this 1970s Zaba stereo system and this Bose subwoofer. And I will show these repairs then in the next repair marathon coming this Friday. And in the meantime, I will see to it then that I get on with that glorious retro sci-fi computer console project, which should go a bit quicker now that the weather has calmed down. If you liked this video, then please give it a like, cause I have no other way of knowing. And if you want to support me in making more videos, then please visit my Patreon at patreon.com/tpai. See you soon.